The UFO case that shocked the world, Betty and Barney Hill. Betty and Barney Hill claimed to have been abducted by extraterrestrials on September 19, 1961. The story of Betty and Barney Hill is one of the most popular UFO abduction stories in history. Perhaps it is the relatability of a couple on their way home from a honeymoon, or maybe it's the amount of evidence that can make even the most hardcore skeptic look twice, or maybe it's the otherworldly feel of it all. Life before UFOs. Betty and Barney Hill did not meet until later in their lives. Both had been through divorces when they engaged in a friendship that quickly turned into a romantic bond. They married in May of 1960, although their lives as newlyweds did not begin until much later. Barney lived in Philadelphia, working as a carrier for the U.S. Post Office, while Betty lived in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, working at New Hampshire's Division of Welfare. Fortunately, Barney was able to get a job transfer to Boston in March of 1961. He moved in with Betty. On Sunday, September 17, Betty, Barney and their dog Delcy hopped in Barney's blue and white, 57 Chevy Bel Air and headed towards Niagara Falls, planning on stopping in Toronto as well as Montreal. However, Barney made a wrong turn while going to Montreal, leading them to the outskirts of the city. Once they heard the announcement of the tropical storm Esther over the radio, their planned evening of experiencing the nightlife of Montreal was over. They decided it would be best to just return home and began heading towards New Hampshire. As they traveled south on Route 3 through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, the sky was still clear and the storm far away. Betty looked in the sky, noticing what she thought at first was a falling star, until it came to a complete halt in the sky. She thought then that it might be a satellite as it began to move in the opposite direction towards the slowly rising moon. When it stopped yet again, Betty told Barney to stop and look at it through the binoculars. It moved vertically, horizontally, ascending and descending in between bouts of remaining completely stationary. They continued on their way, trying to make it back home. As they rounded a curve near Indian Head, a granite formation resembling the silhouette of a Native American face, just south of the Franconia Notch, they noticed the object was much nearer than before. The craft hovered over some trees in a nearby field. Barney described seeing a double row of rectangular windows that stretched across its rim. Two fin-like structures extended from either side of the craft, adorned with a red light on the end. Suddenly the craft tilted towards him and began to descend. Barney raced back to the car, telling Betty that they needed to get out of there. He accelerated down the highway. The craft resumed its position directly above them, keeping up the whole way. Both of them recall hearing a buzzing noise from the trunk of the car, but kept driving, trying to escape whatever this was. The couple heard the buzzing noises again and were driving on Route 3. They estimated they would arrive home by 3 a.m. and were surprised to find that it was a little after 5 when they finally arrived in Portsmouth. Both were in a state of shock after what they had witnessed. After a few hours' rest, Betty called her younger sister, Janet Miller, to tell her of what she had seen. Janet had a sighting of a strange craft herself during the 1950s, and Betty wanted to know if maybe Janet thought what she had seen was similar to what Janet had witnessed. As the storm rolled in, Betty noticed several highly polished spots on the trunk of the car. She brought a compass near the spots, and when placed within them, the compass spun wildly. She described being filled with absolute terror in that moment. The couple also discovered that their watches were broken. Even replacing the batteries did not get them working. Betty and Barney Hill visited the public library on September 23, stumbling upon Donald Kehoe's The Flying Saucer Conspiracy, which introduced them to a world of people who had experienced similar things. A few days later, Betty began to have nightmares about the craft. These dreams mixed the recalled memories of the beeping noises they had heard in their car, as well as being captured and taken aboard the vessel. She wrote some of these dreams down to relieve some of the pressure, and was able to arrange them in a logical and sequential order. In June 1963, Barney began to see psychiatrist Dr. Duncan Stevens, at the behest of his physician, who believed Barney's ailments were psychogenic. Barney thought it was a satellite or perhaps even a military or commercial plane, however, its strange movements made him doubt it. Barney said that he felt like something was placed on his genitals. Although there was no feeling or pleasure associated with it, he suspected that they were taking sperm. She asked the leader if she could take something back as proof, to which the leader agreed and told her to look around for something to take back. Its head was the size of a basketball and had a flat face. Betty sensed this one was hostile, and it kept staring at her from the hallway outside the examining room. David Baker, watercolor artist and NICAP member, was the first to take Betty and Barney Hill's descriptions of the occupants and render them out artistically. The story has become one of the most famous cases in UFO lore.